Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 21 Hats podcast. I'm your host, Lauren Feldman. I see it and I feel it, Liz Picarazzi tells Shawn, Busse, and Jay Goltz this week in a conversation about the looming recession many are predicting. But Liz is not hunkering down. In fact, she has launched an ambitious marketing campaign that relies not on Google AdWords, but on Google Alerts. She's also taking some advice from Carey Smith, the founder of Big Ass Fans, that she didn't want to hear when it was first proffered. Plus, how some owners trap themselves in miserable businesses, and Shawn, Jay, and Liz suggest regulations that need to die. Jay going off on the way businesses are compelled to pay for unemployment insurance. Even in good times, owning and running a business can be a lonely pursuit. Our hope is that these weekly conversations will let owners know they are not alone in facing challenges. Same thing with our daily newsletter, the 21 Hats Morning Report, which Inc. magazine just proclaimed the best newsletter for business owners, and which you can subscribe to at 21hats.com, where you can also find transcripts of our podcast episodes and lots of other articles and interviews. Joining me this week on the podcast are regulars Shawn Busse, CEO of Kinesis, which is based in Portland, Oregon, and works with small businesses on marketing, culture, and strategy. Jay Goltz, whose companies in Chicago include a picture frame business, artist frame service, and a home furnishing store, Jason Home. And Liz Picarazzi, who is CEO of City Bin, which is based in Brooklyn, New York, and makes trash enclosures and package bins. The episode is titled, The Early Warning Signs. Welcome, Shawn, Jay, and Liz. Great to have you here. Today, I want to talk about something that's been in the air lately. All of a sudden, we're hearing a lot about a possible recession on the horizon. Let me start with you, Shawn. Are you seeing a change in the direction of the economy based on your own business?
In terms of like market interest and, do people want to hire us and activity? I'm not really seeing anything on the ground. I'm seeing a lot of news stories like you, and they seem to be sort of centered around the tech sector. And I think, you've just had a bubble in that space for a long time, and that's kind of bursting. And then I think you'll see large corporations probably follow some suit because they probably wanted to have layoffs for a while, but for various PR reasons couldn't do it. I don't know. I'm not really sure. I've been looking at the past recessions and inflationary periods, and the Fed raises rates 0.5, half of a point, quarter of a point, people freak out. It took them almost a decade to kind of get inflation under control back in the 70s and early 80s, and they had to jack rates up to 18, 19%. So I think there's a lot of hand waving and panicking, but in terms of being right around the corner, I don't know that I see it.
How about you, Liz?
So I see it and I feel it.
How so?
It came on pretty suddenly. I think, our April was down 27% to LY, and we were down 57% to our 2022 plan. It was also April 2022 was the first down month that we've had in 15 months. So we're definitely feeling it.
And that's based on demand, not on any supply chain issues that I know you've had from time to time.
It really is just based on demand. There may be a little bit of a spillover effect because if people see on the website that they need to wait 8 to 12 weeks for something and they're on the fence about the purchase, that could make them decide not to. I don't have any anecdotal evidence other than myself as a consumer, how I might react. So yeah, we can see it in actual sales. As I said, 27% down to last year. Being ghosted, no one likes that. We feel like we're being ghosted more. That's noticeable. So, we have to think about how do we deal with being ghosted? We don't normally get rejected as much, I guess is what I'm saying.
What does that mean exactly when you say you're being ghosted? What does that mean in practical terms?
So someone that you may have a really great rapport with and you think that they're going to buy and it's just, you're just waiting for it to happen, just suddenly stops talking to you. Kind of like in a romantic relationship. I don't know how old you are, but nowadays...
I've been married 42 years, so I don't know what you're talking about.
Jay had one date and he was never ghosted, and that was it.
So we've been feeling a bit that we're getting ghosted. But then we can also see things like website visits are down. So I did a quick search and saw that we're 20% down on web traffic from last year at this very time. So those are all numbers, then there are just kind of the relational differences. I think we've probably gotten more price objections than in previous times, which is related to being ghosted. I'm making it sound all really bad. The other side of it, which I'm sure we'll talk about later, is that I've been able to offset the reduction in my consumer business with the government and B2B work.
Hey, Liz, I'm kind of curious, like you're comparing to a time period that was really bizarro, right? Because like last year, people were locked at home. They were spending a ton of money on their homes, right? Just like obscene amounts to fix things up because they were there all the time. And what I'm seeing now is, especially like Oregon was really slow to remove the mask mandate and to allow gatherings. And we've done that now. And people are like, I don't want to be anywhere near my house. Like I'm just seeing just folks don't want to be home. And I'm curious, like maybe that's what you're feeling as opposed to like a systemic, economic, kind of national wide recession.
Yes. However, it is the first down month we've had in 15 months. So that kind of takes the seasonality out of it.
Did you used to spend more on advertising and you stopped? Has anything else changed in the last year?
No, I don't think there are any other things.
I want to come back to what's going well for Liz and how she's adjusting to this situation. But first, Jay, what are you seeing? Do you sense any softening in your business?
It's a little soft, but after reading all of the stuff that's out there in the world, we're living in a new world these days, not that new, and that there's these companies that are extremely well known that everybody thinks they're making money. They've never made money. They do nothing but lose money. And then all of a sudden somebody wakes up and says, oh, wait, we shouldn't be losing money like this. So then I don't think you can look at all that stuff and get a whole lot of information out of it other than the insanity starting to stop.
That's a small piece of this. I mean, as Shawn pointed out, I mentioned that there have been these waves of layoffs. That's concentrated primarily in tech. And I think a lot of what you're talking about is a certain segment of the economy. You said you have seen some softening.
Just a little, but it's always hard to tell.
Is that current business or is that looking?
No, I don't have future business. I've got just current business.
Jay makes a really good point, Lauren, in that tech is now such a disproportional size of the S&P. Many of us have stocks now that are in indexed funds, of which tech is a disproportionately oversized piece of that. And so we're watching our stocks go down, our retirements go down. And this is a classic case of like the stock market isn't the economy, but the psychology of the stock market going down ripples throughout the economy. And I think that's what his point is about tech is like, these are businesses that we put too much faith in. Many of them are not that viable in terms of their long-term durability, and now they're getting hammered, but that has a psychological ripple effect. And maybe to people like Liz, right, where people are like, this is a discretionary thing. My 401k is down. I'm hearing about recession, even though the fundamentals in the market don't say that.
Well, here's a news flash. So all these companies that went out there that are doing e-commerce and they've been banging on, we don't have the burden of brick and mortar and blah, blah, blah. Well, what's happened is freight costs have gone up so substantially that if a company is giving free shipping, it's probably costing them 15% on sales and rent is 10%. So all of a sudden, having brick and mortar is not such a crazy idea. And I think you're starting to see some adjustments to that. That and the cost of marketing online has gone up dramatically. So
let's stick with our businesses. And I think it's clear that it's early, and to whatever extent there is something going on, it's hitting people differently. I mean, I emailed with Paul Downs about this, and his reaction was, I don't see a recession on the horizon at all. And he said that his inquiries are up, I think he said 25% over last year, and his sales pace is really strong. He just hired a couple of people. His only problem is getting raw materials, which is a real problem, of course. But I'm just focusing on your businesses. Jay, you said you're seeing some softening. Are you thinking of doing anything differently?
No, keep in mind, how many recessions have there been since 1978? 5, 6, 7. So I've seen this movie numerous times, and I'm not making any big changes. I will tell you that people to this is about fear, and fear is not a good thing in business. And you can talk yourself into a frenzy and I keep my head down and pay attention to what I'm doing. So,
well, they don't have to be big changes. You can make smaller adjustments. You might decide that you have some openings that you haven't been able to fill during the labor shortage, and you decide, you know what, maybe we don't need to fill those right now.
perhaps I'm not opening new stores. Not that it was going to anyway. I wouldn't be opening new stores right now, certainly, but I would still say 90% of what I do on a daily basis isn't going to be changed any. But you're right. Maybe if I have a bad month or two in a row or three, maybe I won't hire another inside salesperson. That's possible. But I've made some of my best advances during recessions. Everybody else was hiding, and I kept forging ahead. 2008, I bought a big, cheap building, and it was a game changer. So I think that going into defense isn't necessarily the best idea if you still got some gas in the tank.
So what are you thinking, Liz? You mentioned before that there's some business that's compensating for the consumer business that is weakening.
We are working on a couple of government projects now that literally came in right as the recession seemed to be hitting. So the government projects, in terms of revenue, there's a little bit of a delay on that. So the numbers that I gave for April don't really reflect the fact that we are working on the project without being paid yet, which happens later. So the government work has also been good because the success that we had in New York in Times Square and the great publicity we got when the mayor really unveiled our trash enclosures, in front of 20 cameras. It was all over the media. We're going to be marketing that moment forever, probably.
That's a nice moment.
We're shifting our marketing to going to more B2B and more B2G. So that trash enclosure was purchased by the Times Square Business Improvement District, which is called Times Square Alliance. And there are hundreds of bids all over the country. And so we're basically taking that image, taking that before and after, the basic endorsement of the mayor of New York in Times Square. It couldn't be anything better. And we're marketing that to bids all over the place. So we're starting to get interest from people, in Philadelphia and in Boston and a couple other places immediately based on the news that just happened last month. So we're kind of viewing this as like strike while the iron's hot. And it does mean that I have to shift my attention away from some projects that I really, really loved. So as we've talked about before, our bear-proof enclosure, I now am putting that on hold. And I hated that. We're in spring and summer. Normally we market our pool boxes, our sheds, and our new planters. All of those outdoor living projects, which are passion projects for me, they haven't ever been profitable. I have to put that down. Even though we are in the outdoor living time of the year, I have to focus just on trash enclosures and to a particular couple of segments. It's really requiring a lot more discipline than I normally have, but I just know that is...
It sounds like that might have been something that you needed to do regardless of the...
I think she brings up a good point, that these are the times where you need to start paying attention to what makes money, and those other things, put them on hold. I think that's smart, and I've certainly am in that same situation.
Well, you guys have been listening to Carey Smith a little bit too much, if you ask me.
Not me.
How so?
I don't know Carey Smith.
Well, when I talk to him...
Wait. Carey Smith is the founder of Big Ass Fans.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
He bootstrapped it and then sold it for $500 million a few years ago, and now has a business, an investment business. He invests in other small businesses. Interesting guy with very strong opinions. What were you referring to, Liz?
Well, so I had a couple of really great consultations with Carey Smith last summer at the introduction of Lauren. Thank you. But it was positive. It was good and bad.
He hates the idea of making anything in China. I suspect that probably came up with you.
That's one thing. That came up quite a lot. It was actually hard to talk about anything but that. But no, I take that back. He gave me some really good advice. And basically one of them was like, put down the package locker, put down the planters, the sheds, the pool boxes, all the things that I was really lit up about, and focus on trash enclosures and stay focused on the market you're in, which is higher end, outdoor living, B2B, and don't try to go downstream, which I was thinking of going into Costco. So in just a couple of conversations with him, he delivered a lot of messages I didn't like to hear, but I must admit I heard them. And some of my behavior right now is actually a result of him saying, put down anything but the trash enclosures, get really, really, really good at those.
Liz, you mentioned that you're planning on marketing the moment you had in Times Square with the mayor all over the place. Are you saying that you're going to be spending more on marketing, or are you just shifting the type of marketing you were doing to reflect that experience?
I'm shifting to more direct sales or prospecting. I hired an outbound salesperson to contact all the bids, like in the US. We're starting kind of city by state. That moment in directly marketing to the very same people that we know have trash in their downtown areas and want a solution for it. That's not something that I did 2 weeks ago, but I implemented that really fast because we're getting traction with business improvement director, executive directors who saw the news and know that they need it too.
Hey, Liz, can you clarify what you mean when you say bids?
Sure. So business improvement district, at least on the East Coast. So like in New York City, there's 80 business improvement districts. Times Square is just one of them. So I've marketed to the rest of them as well. And I got a lot of purchases from them just actually in the last 2 weeks.
Oh, that's so good.
And that was a direct result of us marketing that moment in Times Square to all the other bids who, are kind of understandably, me too. I want those as well. Why can Times Square get those, but my neighborhood can't? So that has been a very good talking point for us. And so our executive directors are typically essentially the CEOs of each business improvement district, and they have them all over the country. So that's a decision maker, and it's someone who we know is dealing a lot with trash and rats. So our message is trash rats, trash rats.
So not the procurement, right? Not the bottom of the chain, the procurement people, but actually the people who are sort of politically and organizationally motivated to bring about change.
Yes.
So Liz, I was asking about the marketing because when people fear there's a recession coming on, often the first thing they cut is marketing. It sounds like you might actually be spending more.
I'm spending more on business development and specifically in this area, but I am not spending a dime on Google AdWords. I cut that back a while ago, but recently I had a really amazing insight. I've been using Google Alerts where I set it up for business improvement district, trash, and rats. And I'm getting all these articles from all over the country that are saying where this is an issue. And then we're just picking up the phone and calling them.
Wow.
Ah, that's so good.
That is a really, really great benefit of Google that was far exceeded any of the thousands of dollars I spent over the years on Google AdWords. So I suddenly had a very warm, fuzzy feeling about Google. It was literally I felt like I had an adoration. I had this feeling I haven't had about Google in a really long time.
You'll get over it.
But I realized
Wow.
they didn't have to charge me to use that Google alert. It just comes with it. And look at the way I used their tool, unlike AdWords, actually brought me business.
Liz, your strategy here is genius. Oh my gosh, I'm so happy for you.
Oh, thank you.
I have to tell you, you should look into, you're calling it business improvement district. That's what they call it in New York, but that's not what they're calling it in Chicago, I don't think. And I'm sure it's the same concept, but you should look into what the terminology in every city is, because that's not a Chicago phrase.
Yeah, because I didn't know what you meant.
I think you're exactly right. And that would just be more alerts for you.
Yeah.
I mean, the point is, during a recession, which, like I said, I've been through many, yes, there's less people maybe looking for your product, but then your competition is almost gone away. So it could actually be more effective to be continuing to market and advertising, because I've just learned the competition hides under the table, and I've just learned hiding under the table is never a good thing. But that's what people do. They get it in their head and they convince themselves they should stop spending money, and it's an opportunity to go out there and get more market share if you can afford to.
So Shawn, speaking of marketing, I know we've had conversations about this. You do not see yourself as a marketing guy or your business as explicitly a marketing business, but you have told us that a lot of your initial conversations start there. People come to you looking for marketing help. Are you seeing any softening in inquiries? Are you concerned going forward that you might get that typical drop-off where people stop making those calls during a slow period?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm just not seeing it. And again, I have some geographic bias here. So because we were locked down for so long, everybody is just desperate to meet and connect and go to conferences. And I'm seeing just a lot of energy, enthusiasm for just doing business. But I'm in the B2B space. The impact of recessions hits us later than most, if it does.
I'm surprised. I would have thought you would get hit early.
Yeah, I mean, I think because a lot of our clients are B2B and not B2C, most marketing agencies service B2C. And so they get hit first and worst. So we get hit later, if at all. We're not cyclical in the same way.
Interesting.
Yeah, most marketing shops though are like they're the first to go.
I can kind of tell you how it works. When things are good, the CEO or marketing person is driving things. And when all of a sudden things get tight, everyone runs into the CFO's office and the CFO grabs the wheel and says, okay, we got to cut all non-necessary expenses. And everybody just lays down and plays dead. That's what I've seen. And I think that's why the first thing to cut is there's nothing to show for the marketing expense necessarily. Obviously there is, but it's not on the paper. So, okay, cut the marketing expenses.
Have you seen that in your business, Jay, or in other people's businesses?
No, because I'm a marketing guy, and I wouldn't allow that to happen.
Jay's a total marketing guy. I mean, look at Liz, for example. What she just described, right, is a business transformation. And that's the space we're in now, whereas most marketers are in the activity business. Right. So they're in the we posted 30 posts on Facebook or we, ran these Google campaigns, but they can't connect it to actual results, which is why Liz is like, I'm not spending any more money on digital. Right. So, most marketers are not in a place where they can actually demonstrate their value to business problems. And so they get fired. When times get hard, they get fired. That's how it works.
That's the return on investment.
Like what Liz just described, if Liz were the marketer within her company and she had done those results, holy cow, they're not going to fire her ever. She's the best. So I think that's the problem with most marketing is it's not connected to kind of business strategy, business results. And so thus, when times get hard, they're the first to go.
All right. Let's move to another topic. I asked each of you to think about the regulations that drive you crazy and that if you were king of the world, you would do something about. Liz, let me start with you. Is there something that you would love to flip a switch and change on?
Tariffs. Stop them.
That's been ongoing since
August 2018. I will never forget. That was one of Trump's first and very famous decisions.
That's 4 years. How big an impact has that had on you?
So it has had a very big impact. I mean, when I first started manufacturing in China, my tariff rate was 2.9%. That kind of hurt. And then for a while after the Trump tariffs, it was close to 20%. And then it shifted down and now it's at 11%. But I have to compare that 11% to the 2.9 I had before. I mean, it's almost quadruple. And that has really, it's just decreased profits. We've had to increase prices as a result. There's really not a lot of alternatives to offsetting that other than raising prices. And so it really does all trickle down. If someone were to say, well, just produce in the U.S., as I've discussed on here before, even without the tariffs, it's so much more to produce in the U.S. So for me, my motivation or my ability to bring manufacturing back is it's not gonna offset the price of the tariff. It's such a big difference.
Okay, but so here's the question though: is a level playing field? Everybody's paying the tariffs. Why is that really hurting your profits given that everybody has to pay the tariff? So everyone's got the same cost structure. Why can't you just pass it along? Because at the end of the day, people don't want rats running into their garbage. So
actually, I misspoke. It doesn't necessarily impact our profit. It may feel like it because I do pass it right on. So I pass that right on along. When we have freight increases, as we have had during the pandemic, all that is passed on to the consumer. We've had 3 price raises in 2 years.
Do you follow the politics of it? Do you have any sense where this is headed?
So I have to say I was pretty surprised that when Biden took office that he didn't reduce or end the incremental tariffs. That was a pretty big disappointment. My position on this is most Americans don't understand tariffs. If they hear, there are tariffs being put on Chinese goods, I have a family member who thought that China was paying the tariffs.
I think that's how Donald Trump sold the tariffs when he introduced them.
Well, and this family member voted for Trump once and probably twice. I'm not sure about the second one, but I know about the first. And you can see where my politics are on this. But, I think there's a lot of Americans that are like, we're going to screw China. We're going to put a tariff on them. No, it's being tariff on an American small family-owned company who happened to produce in 3 U.S. states before making the decision to go to China. So I really gave it my all before I made the decision to go over there. So that also really does bother me that the average American doesn't know that I'm the one paying the tariff. They think China is paying my tariff, I think. And so we've had to really educate certain family members about how that works.
That's a fun holiday.
Shawn, how about you? Is there a regulation that you focus on?
I think that for me, my crusade right now is the cost of housing and the impact of high housing prices on businesses. And what I mean by that is it's getting more and more, well, let's just say almost impossible, depending on where you live, for you to have the promise of your employees to buy a home. And I've been thinking about, because I'm building a house right now, I'm watching the impact of regulation on home building and the cost that I'm incurring from that, and sort of thinking about how that ripples through the economy. And I would encourage, especially municipalities and county governments to think about the cost of regulation that they impose on building, because you're seeing just more and more the impossibility of being able to live in a community. And I think that impacts businesses dramatically.
What's the impact you're thinking of, Shawn? Does it make it harder to hire? How does it affect the business?
Yeah. So unless you are in one of these obscene tech sector businesses that can afford to pay 6-figure salaries to every employee, how can you even run your business? If you can't, if the employees can't afford to live in your community, that's really what I'm talking about. Access to talent, the ability for young people to move to communities and to be able to live, at a reasonable price point. We're just creating that disparity in our urban environments, and it's really concerning. That you think about manufacturing, right? Most manufacturing jobs historically have paid in the $40,000 to $60,000 range. In the Portland metro right now, our median house price is $550,000. That's, gosh, I almost can't do the math. 8 times the median salary right now.
Well, that wasn't so bad when interest was 3%. Now that interest is 5%, that's a whole nother animal.
Yeah, even at 3%, it's really tough. We have to remember, as business owners, our compensation and our personal wealth is really different than, you understand this, Jay. You have folks who make probably $17 an hour, right?
Yeah.
I know you care about your employees a lot, and I care about my employees a lot, and I want them to have the promise of prosperity and wealth creation, and that usually is through home buying. And it's just getting really tough. And I think if you look in the New York Times, for example, Washington Post, they've done an analysis on this. And I hate to say it, but the more progressive cities are the worst for this because of their regulation and cost of construction.
Do you think that's the primary factor? There clearly is a housing shortage in this country, and it's affecting communities all over the country. Is it regulation that explains that shortage?
I'm told it's the 2008 crash has never recovered from.
Yeah, I mean, 2008 crash crushed home construction. But what the problem is that the cities didn't adapt to that shortage in any way. So in many cases, like in Portland, for example, I'll just give you an example. The city, through best of intentions said 20% of multifamily housing now has to be dedicated to low-income folks, which sounds really great, except that now they've broken the financial model of construction for developers. And so now what do? Basically developers, because of that requirement, they're moving out of Portland. They're not building in Portland anymore. And so, less and less stock, more and more people moving here from San Francisco, driving up price. It's just out of control.
How about you, Jay? What regulation gets under your skin?
Okay, I won't call it a regulation. It's just the way the law works. But this is fixable in 3 minutes if somebody would pay attention. And here's something. I think it'd be fair to say every business owner is paying for this. Do you know how unemployment compensation works in your state? I'll ask the two of you. Liz, Shawn, do you know how it works? How many days does someone have to work before you're liable for all of their unemployment insurance?
1.
Yeah, I think it's 1.
1 day?
Yeah, I think immediately.
You think that if you hire someone and you fire them 4 days later, you're responsible for all of their unemployment?
You shouldn't be.
I got the shouldn't be.
But you may be. At least for those 4 days. I don't think their prior employment necessarily should be covered. But I used to run a business where I fired people a lot, and they always fired for unemployment.
Well, so here's an example of the end of the story is neither of you really do know, and that's what I'm telling you. So here's how it works in Illinois, at least.
It varies by state, I'm guessing, right, Jay?
Yes. Okay, but here's how it works in Illinois, just as a baseline. In Illinois, somebody could work for Sears Roebuck and Company for 30 years, and they come to you and you think, all right, they need a job. I'll give them a chance. And you work with them. And in 30 days, you have bought the farm.
Oh, God.
You are responsible for all of the unemployment in 30 days. And my argument is...
You need to explain that, Jay.
Okay, so someone works for you for 26 days and you say, you know what, this just isn't working out. And
when you say you're responsible for all the unemployment, you don't, the business doesn't fund all the unemployment compensation collected by an employee.
Yes, absolutely. That's my point. Absolutely. I'm going to tell you exactly how it works. And I'm sure of this. The person works for you for 23 days. You decide, you know what, this is a bad fit. They can't do this job. You fire them. Okay. You have no unemployment. There's no unemployment exposure. They can go to unemployment. They're not going to pay. Now, they work for you for 35 days. Anything over 30, you are responsible for all of their unemployment.
Jay, what you're saying that you pay every cent of the unemployment compensation that an employee collects?
Every cent plus 30%. Yes. It's the big secret. I've never met anyone that understood this. I've done speeches to probably 10 or 20 groups. Not one person has ever raised their hand and goes, yeah, I've got to handle it. No one understands this. And here's how it works. Now, so you hire this person. They end up getting 13 weeks or 26 weeks of unemployment. Now, that's probably going to be something in the neighborhood of $5,000 or $10,000. Here's the problem. You don't get a bill in the mail that says, oh, Liz, here's a $10,000 bill for that guy. Remember Bob, the one you did a favor for? You thought was going to work out and you fired him. Here's a bill for $10,000. That's not how it works. It goes into your rate. And then your rate might go up 0.2%, but how many business owners are paying attention to their unemployment rate? From my experience, next to none. I've never met anyone that knew what their unemployment rate was. So your unemployment rate goes up from 3.2 to 3.6 on every single employee, and you are paying every single dollar of that unemployment plus a 30% markup. And that is how it works. And most people do not understand that. Like I said, I don't think I met anyone that did. That's an expensive thing. So my argument is, would it be so terrible if it was 90 days? You had a chance to get it. In some states, it is 90 days. I got to tell you, this is shocking, but absolutely true. I went to a seminar on unemployment rates that a lawyer from the Department of Labor, Illinois, was running. And some guy was complaining about some unemployment he had to pay for some guy he fired legitimate that he didn't think he should get it. And the lawyer goes, well, it's not like you're paying all the unemployment. I had to correct the lawyer. I go, excuse me. And he didn't argue with me. He didn't know how it works himself. It's real simple. you get the paperwork. It says right on there in black and white, here's what you paid out. Here's the markup. We divide that by your, like the first 12,000 or something. And that's the rate. It's right there in black and white, but most people don't look at it. And when I say most, I don't mean 53%. I mean 90-some% of people have no idea how that works. And all it's doing is putting a burden on us. Instead of Sears paying the unemployment, we're paying it, except Sears is out of business. So the government figured out, better to stick it on the employer that's still in business than someone that went out of business. It's really not right. And it's certainly not helpful to people that are looking for a job.
Let me ask you this, Jay. You're running a business for 20 years and no one ever files for unemployment. You never, for whatever reason, it never happens. So you've been paying at a rate that whole period. You've been kicking into the system a significant amount of money. After 20 years of that, an employee leaves your business for whatever reason and collects unemployment. Is that going to drive your rate up even though you've gone 20 years?
Absolutely. No, here's how it works. Back in the day when I was hiring and firing, because I didn't know what I was doing 30 years ago, my rate got to the maximum, 7.2. Now, I didn't have one claim for 3 years. So my rate's at the rock bottom. It's like 1.8 or something.
And that's 1.8% of your total payroll?
No, not total. The first $12,000 or $13,000 of labor. The point is, look at me with 130 employees. The difference in paying 1.8 versus 7.2, let's just say round numbers, 5%. We're talking about, here I have a calculator, 130 people. It's around 12,000, I think. 12,000 times 130. That's on $1.5 million. We're talking about $75,000 for unemployment. We're talking about paying $75,000 a year for unemployment insurance. That, if you're running a good business, shouldn't be that high. And it's about being more careful who you hire. It's about making sure that you figure out whether they're going to work out if you can by 30 days. And it's about contesting them if it's not legitimate.
Yeah, contesting them takes so much time, though.
And you'll usually lose. I mean, the better answer is be more careful who you hire. Frankly, that was the most important part of that. But I will tell you, at 28 days, we asked the manager, how's Bob working out? Yeah, not great. Okay, we should move on because it's very expensive.
Well, it also depends on the business you're in. So one of the things I like about my current business is that I don't have much turnover. I have a very consistent staff. Whereas my previous business, which was a handyman company, it was like a revolving door. And some of those guys knew how to work the system. So they would come in and work for like 30 days. Then they would stop responding to job orders and they would thus file for unemployment saying that there wasn't enough work. There are all sorts of situations. But my cost related to unemployment when I first started the business may have been about 2%. But by the end of it, because all these guys had either been fired for cause or left on their own, my rate was close to 8%.
That's a lot of money.
It was crazy amount. I was aware it was happening. And because of that, I tried to fight a lot of them. But then I realized that was a big suck on my time. And I figured, you know what? This is just the cost of doing business. And then yet again, it gets built into your price to your customers.
There are companies that will fight those for you. I used to use one. I don't use them anymore because we have very few cases that need them. But there are companies that will fight them. But the problem is, if it turns into a he said, she, like in that case, he said, she said, oh, well, no, I didn't get that thing. I could see where you didn't win some of them because they're going to go to the poor guy that needs unemployment. Whereas at least if you're in a retail business like mine, they didn't show up for 3 days. They didn't call in. They violated our policy. I do win them sometimes, but I don't have a lot of them to begin with.
So, Jay, you said you could make this change in 3 minutes. I get the change being
somebody in government needs to say, yeah, let's move the 30 days to 90. Done.
Where does that money come from then?
I'm paying it.
No, if you weren't.
Oh, then it would have to go to their previous employer, perhaps. But they changed that rule about 20 years ago. That's how it used to be. Somebody said, oh, wait, instead of going after companies that went out of business, let's just go after the new sucker and let them pay it.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Your example was Sears. It might be hard to get that money from Sears these days.
Exactly.
So what would happen if this change that you're suggesting was made?
The government should take the bazillions of dollars that Sears paid in and pay it out of that. I mean, they just shifted the responsibility from government to employers. It's not right. It's just not right. Here's the problem. It's really not fair to the employees because you're more hesitant to give them a chance because you know you're going to get stuck. It could cost you $10,000 of unemployment.
But how does that work, Jay? If, like, let's say somebody works for me for 10 years, they quit, and then they go work for you for,
33 days.
33 days. Now and they didn't work out for you, but why am I having to pay for their unemployment?
You're not. That's the point. If I fired them because they couldn't do the job.
But that's what you're arguing, that I should be paying for their unemployment, right?
No. If they quit your job, maybe they don't get unemployment. I mean, I'm not trying to fix all social skills. I don't know how that could work. But the point is, I should pay it. I mean, who should pay the 10 grand? Let's figure this out. Should Shawn pay it? He quit the job on you. You had nothing to do with it. Okay. Should I pay it? I gave the guy a chance and it didn't work out for 30 days. Or should the employee take the hit? Which one of us should take the hit on that? That's the question.
The government.
Okay. Maybe.
Well, somebody's got to pay for it.
Yeah, maybe.
At some level. That money's got to come from somewhere.
This is a whole nother conversation around, how much we put on the business to care for societal needs.
So it's funny, I had a listener question all teed up to ask you guys from Ann Merrow, who runs Long Thread Media in Colorado, and it was about how unemployment rates work for businesses and how to manage that. So you've kind of answered that question that I had teed up. Ann did have one follow-up question, which is what Liz was getting at, which is, I think everybody assumes that it's impossible to contest these things in most cases. When is it worth trying? When do you try to contest it, Jay?
I just had one. I win them. I don't do a lot of them anymore, but here was the situation. I had a receptionist. She was not doing a good job. She was constantly she was a management problem. My managers were throwing up their hands and said, this isn't working. She storms up to me one time, and I was a little friendly with her. I talked to her here and there, and she goes, I can't report to so-and-so anymore. So I said to her, you know what? She's the manager. I'm told that you come in late regularly. That's really a problem. And I have to tell you, I'm not going to apologize for them for holding the standards of the company. I have to tell you, if this job isn't right for you, just tell her you're going to be looking for a job, and she will be happy to work with you so you can go get a new job. And it doesn't have to, it doesn't have to be adversarial. That's exactly what I said to her. She doesn't show up to work the next day. She doesn't show up at all. She goes down on unemployment. She actually tells the unemployment adjudicator, I think they're called, what happened. She calls us and she goes, what's the story? So my HR person repeated exactly. The owner of the company told her, just tell us you're looking for a job and we'll work with you. And you know what the adjudicator said? Perfect. That's what I wanted to hear. She was aggravated with it. Like, where do you come off just storming off the job? I mean, she didn't get unemployment. Oops.
What defines that situation?
You have to have rules. You need to have the rules in place. Here's what our attendance policy is. Here's what our late policy is. And you got to follow the rules. If they're just quote unquote not doing a good job, you can't win. You just can't. It has to be something that they have control over, like coming to work on time, like coming to work. But if you just go, you know what? They were sloppy. They had an attitude problem. You're not going to win. You're just not. It has to be something they have control over. I would add a fourth piece of the puzzle. First is be careful who you hire. Second, it's the 30th day before that. Figure out if you think it's going to work. Third one is contested. Here's a fourth one. Tell them to their face, you know what? I'm concerned this isn't the right job for you. You keep making the same error over and over. I've talked to you 6 times about it. And then they go on their own. They figure out this is the wrong job. Good for you. Good for them. Everybody wins. But you have to have honest conversations.
All right, we're just about out of time. I want to hit one more thing, which is the New York Times recently ran a story which pointed out that a lot of people don't realize how wealth tends to get generated in this country, and that a tremendous percentage of it comes from people who build unsexy small businesses, which is kind of intriguing. They were talking about things like car dealers or, HVAC companies.
Did they mention picture framing?
They did not, Jay.
Wow. Once again, getting no respect.
Is that a sexy business or an unsexy business?
Yeah, there you go.
That's why they didn't mention it.
But it was based on studies. The story also pointed out that studies indicate that, as we all kind of know, money doesn't necessarily buy happiness. And based on these studies, the things that do generate happiness are sex, exercise, and gardening. The obvious question for the three of you is, are you getting enough sex, exercise, and gardening? Anybody?
I don't do 2 of those things. You have to figure out.
I'm not sure we want to know, Jay.
I'm just throwing it out there.
Well, I will say gardening is a great activity if you're into it. So for me, anything having to do with home improvement or gardening puts me in that sort of state of flow that you lose if you're just too stressed out a lot. So, I mean, I am not a great gardener, but I know that when I turn off my devices and I get my hands doing something, and I know Shawn is a lot like this as well, that can make me really happy. And when I don't do it, it's pretty noticeable. Like if I work too much and I don't do something that turns off my head, it's going to show up somewhere else in my life. So I definitely think that's true. And, for me, it was the same when I was in corporate. I mean, part of the reason my first business started was that I was doing a lot of home renovations to soothe the pain from working in a large corporation where there were too many meetings. So when I had the chance on the weekend to do gardening or home improvement, that was like really cathartic. And that led to my first company. So again, I think what makes you happy, sometimes it is the most simple things. I think often it's something where your device is off that can bring you that happiness.
My cousin Neil, who runs my home store, said to me one day, "It's too bad you don't have hobbies." And I said, "Are you serious? My business is my hobby. I like going to work every day. I like writing advertising copy. I like figuring stuff out. So I don't need a distraction. I like what I do every day. And I the extent of my gardening is pulling weeds, which is cathartic. I feel like I've gotten rid of the invaders. But other than that,
I feel the same way. I like mowing the lawn.
It's a great article. I mean, I thought there was a lot to think about there, especially around businesses that I wrote down what I wrote. I wrote unsexy monopolies, so like these businesses where they kind of own a geographic region and are doing something not that remarkable, but there's just no competition.
I also have to say there's a lot of joy in just making customers happy. There's joy in doing a good job, in having employees that are happy, and having customers who are happy.
Yeah. I think a lot of people build miserable businesses because they think that's what they have to do to make money.
Miserable in what sense, Shawn?
Well, they just start from a P&L spreadsheet perspective as opposed to like, how do they build something where they show up for work and are happy about showing up at work? And I think like Jay is a good example, right? He's happy to go to work. And I think Liz is happy to go to work, even though we have hard things we face. Like we get joy in going to work. And I think so much of the mentality is around, are you growing fast? Are you making enough money? And it's just like, well, what about joy? Like, where do you, and how do you create that with your work? And I find that a lot of folks don't ask that question.
They just hate their customers. I mean, if you talk to companies, there's a lot of people that just hate their customers. They complain about their customers all the time.
And their employees.
Yeah.
And their employees, absolutely. Yeah, all the time I see that. That's unfortunate and unnecessary, I might add.
Yeah, it's totally unnecessary. Folks get trapped. They get these golden handcuffs on where they've built a business that's a certain size and they've built it on customers that they hate. And then they're screwed because like that flows into the culture. They get turnover. I mean, it's just brutal. So I think you got to start from a position of what's going to give you joy, what's going to make you happy. And then, folks will feel that.
So what you're saying is, here's my thing. You want to build a virtuous cycle instead of a vicious cycle.
Yes. 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 Amen. Let's end on that.
All right. My thanks to Shawn Busse, Jay Goltz, and Liz Picarazzi. As always, thanks for sharing, guys.
Wait, don't leave yet. If you have a question or a comment that you'd like the 21 Hats owners to address, send it to me by replying to your morning report or by email at lauren@21hats.com. That's LOREN @21hats.com. Do it now before you forget, and don't be afraid to tell Jay what you really think. He can take it. And if you got something out of this conversation, help us reach more business owners. Tell a friend. Subscribe and review us wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on Twitter. Subscribe to the Morning Report at 21hats.com. This episode was produced by Jess Thuberon, founder of Blank Word Productions. Okay, now you can leave. Thanks for listening, everyone.